On August 6, 2011, a 32-year-old seafood vendor named Carla Flores, she stepped out the front door onto the streets of Culiacan. Carla was going to deliver this tray of shrimp, and Carla had made it all the way back to the alleyway right near her house, when suddenly she heard this loud sound. This small, hard object smashed into her right cheek, and she fell onto the pavement, and so instinctively, Carla reached up and she touched her cheek, and she felt a warm, wet liquid. 20 minutes later, a receptionist at Culiacan General Hospital watched as a man carried a bloody, unconscious woman into the emergency room. The guy just said, "Look, I was driving down the road and I saw this woman bloody in the streets, and so I brought her here. She was unconscious, her mouth was hanging open, and the entire right side of her face was totally mangled. And then embedded in this mess on the right side of her cheek, basically in her head, was this weird, dark-colored object." Dr. Gustavo Mesa walked into Carla's hospital room. And so Dr. Mesa leaned in and looked at her wound, and he caught a glimpse of what looked like a dark-colored stone buried inside of her cheek. She would have to undergo an x-ray to really figure out where it was in her skull and how exactly they'd be able to get it out. A few minutes later, Dr. Mesa stood in the radiology department, and it was immediately clear to him and all the other medical staff that what was in Carla's cheek was not a rock. The object was shaped like an oval, it had round edges, and it was perfectly symmetrical. But he didn't have a better guess for what it was. So he ordered a CAT scan of Carla's head, and when the results came in and Dr. Mesa looked at the image, Dr. Mesa ran to the nearest nurse's station and told the nurse to evacuate everybody from the emergency room, grabbed the hospital phone, and he dialed a military official. Less than an hour later, Carla was no longer in the hospital. She was now out in the middle of a grassy field, laying on her back. An anesthesiologist walked up to her and injected a local anesthetic into her cheek. Carla knew there were 2 doctors and a nurse standing by to perform an operation on her, but also there were 2 army soldiers just a few feet away from her. She heard the soldiers giving directions and the clinking of surgical instruments. Carla felt a shift inside of her face, and it was the doctors and nurses pulling this object out of her cheek. It was a live grenade. That's why she was being operated on, not in the hospital, but out in this open field, because if it did go off mid-operation, it would at least limit casualties. And that's also why the military was called in to tell the medical staff how to handle this live piece of ordnance. It's unknown who shot the grenade, why they shot it, or whether Carla was the intended target, or simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Carla would ultimately lose half her teeth, she would undergo multiple reconstructive surgeries, and she would be left with a huge scar on her right cheek. And she was forever grateful to the stranger who brought her to the hospital, and to the medical team and the army soldiers who risked their lives to save her.